Okay, so thank you very much for coming to my talk on what do mismatching gestures teach us. So let me begin with the interesting video of a president of the United States, but not this guy, but a former guy. Oh, just a minute. Okay, so I'm gonna show you a video. By the way, I think Uchihara-san posted the links to the video I'm gonna use in my presentation. There are two links. Because I'm gonna use two videos, and the first one is this one. So if you have trouble seeing the video smoothly, please click the link instead. So here's a video of a former president, and I want you to think about what's wrong with this gesture. Here we go.
Doing a better job of talking to each other. The left hand now knows what the right hand is doing.
Okay, so did you notice what's wrong with this gesture? Let me play one more time.
Doing a better job of talking to each other. The left hand now knows what the right hand is doing.
So I hope by now you know what's wrong with this gesture. Okay, here we go. So let me talk about the agenda for my talk. So first, I'm going to begin with the definition of mismatching gesture, and then move on to do children use mismatching gestures? And third, do students use mismatching gestures? And then moving on to instruction. What would happen if teachers use mismatching gestures in math class? And the five, what's going to happen if teachers use mismatching gestures in language class? And finally, do language teachers really use mismatching gestures in the real classroom? Okay. So let me begin with the definition of a mismatching gesture, which is pretty simple. Okay. So when we speak something, we refer to something that is called verbal referent. And if we use gesture at the same time, we refer to something by using gesture, which is called gesture referent. Okay. And when these two are not in agreement with each other, the gesture is called mismatching gesture. So which is really simple, right? Now, moving on to the second topic, do children use mismatching gestures? Okay. It is known that children start deictic gesture. Deictic gesture is a pointing gesture between 9 and 12 months before they say their first words. So, for example, maybe a baby is going to point at the chair and says, "Mommy." Okay? So you can notice that this is an example of mismatching gesture. However, soon after this, the researchers found that the baby is going to say, "Mommy" to chair. So what this shows is that the baby is trying to say "mommy" to chair in the left picture. However, because baby is still on the first one word stage, she is not able to say "mommy" to chair. So instead, the baby is referring to two things at the same time using different modalities. Okay, so pointing at the chair by gesture, and the mommy by speech. So the baby is in a transitional stage from the one word stage to two word stage. Okay, so it's a sign of development. All right, moving on to students. How about students using mismatching gestures? Here is the notion of conservation. I'm sure you know this. So amount of water in the two glasses of the same shape is the same, as you know. And even if we pour one of them into a different container of different shape, we know that the amount of water will be kept the same, right? The same thing can be said for numbers and also the lengths. Okay. However, children may not notice this. They need to be cognitively developed to know that this conservation notion. Okay. So a group of researchers asked a group of children if they know this concept. Okay, so there were some students who know them, there were some who don't know them, but they divided the children into two different groups. One is a matching group, that is when they explain the concept, they use the gestures that are in agreement with the speech. Okay, so speech and gesture were the same. For example, the boy said this container is wide, where he used the hands with showing the width. So it's a matching condition. Whereas there's a mismatching condition group, which means this girl said this container is tall, but her hands were showing the width. So it's a mismatching condition. And only those children who are partially right or partially wrong received instruction of this conservation notion. And those children who are 100% right or wrong were eliminated. Okay. And the question is, which group of learners learned more after they got the instruction of conservation? The answer was mismatching group, because they were able to learn more than the people in the matching group. So researchers claim that mismatching gesture is a sign that the person is in the transitional knowledge state, just like we saw in the baby's case. They claim that although she is still unable to verbalize the concept, she maybe is ready to learn from it, instruction on it. And they say it could be implicit knowledge. But anyway, as you can see from these two examples, babies and children, showing mismatching gesture is not really a bad thing. Okay? It's a sign of development. But now we may be more interested in teaching. Okay, so moving on to math class. What would happen if teachers use mismatching gestures in math class? Okay. So here's a simple equation. I hope everybody is able to solve this problem easily. There are two ways to solve this problem. One is called equalizer. Okay, so if we use equalizer, the teacher may explain something like, we can add 6 plus 4 plus 3, which equals 13. We want to make the other side of the equal sign the same amount, and 10 plus 3 also equals 13, so 10 is the answer. While saying that, the teacher uses gesture like sweep with palm on the left side problem, drop hand, and sweep with palm on the right side, okay, to show that the both sides are equal. The other strategy is add subtract. In the speech, teacher may say something like, we can add 6 plus 4 plus 3, which equals 13. We then subtract the other 3 from 13 and get 10 as the answer. And the gesture is like pointing at the 6, then 4, and the left 3, then produce a flick away gesture near the right 3. Okay. So these are two different strategies to solve this problem. Okay. So the researchers prepared 6 groups of learners. On the left side, they were taught only one strategy orally, which is equalizer. But in group 1, the teacher did not use any gesture. Group 2, teacher used matching gesture, which means the gesture was also equalizer. But in group 3, the teacher intentionally used different mismatching gesture as a subtract. Okay. And group 4, 5, 6 on the right side, they were taught 2 different strategies orally. So, but group 4, there was no gesture done by teacher. Group 5, it was a matching gesture was done by the teacher. But group 6, the teacher used mismatching gestures. Okay, and they did a post test. The question is, which group do you think performed the best, and maybe second best? Okay, ready? So here's the answer. So it turned out the group 3 performed the best. What was group 3? That was mismatching condition, taught only one strategy orally. So speech was equalizer, but gesture was as subtract. It seems like this group performed the best because they were able to learn 2 different strategies at the same time. They are using different modalities. And group 6 was the second best. Again, this was a mismatching condition, but they were taught 2 different strategies orally. So in the session 1, they were taught equalizer verbally, but gesture was as subtract. And the second session, as subtract was taught, but the gesture was equalizer. Okay, so in both cases, the mismatching condition was better than the matching condition. So what can we learn from it? It seems like learners can learn both strategies concurrently by presenting them via different modalities. But if they are if they are taught using the same modalities, it seems like the performance will be worse. And learners learn best when one strategy was taught orally and the other strategy was taught gesturally, but not orally at the same time. Okay. So that is about math class. Okay, but of course, many people are more interested in language class. So how about language class? What's gonna happen if teachers use mismatching gestures in language class? This is hardly ever examined, but there are some. Let's begin with Japanese. Okay, so you can see a picture of matching gesture on the left side. Can you guess what this word is? I think it's pretty easy, right? It's a drink, nomu. Okay. And on the right side, it's a mismatching condition. Although, I mean, if you're a native speaker of Japanese, you can probably say this is also can be a drink, right? Yeah, like a small wrestler who won the championship could do it like that. But anyway, maybe it's not a typical drinking performance. Okay? And this is a vocabulary acquisition study. So they tested how many vocabularies they remembered in the post test. And here is the result. There are two results. First free recall result was they conducted 3 post tests, about 5 minutes, 2 days, 1 week. Across the 3 testing time, speech mismatch condition performed the worst. Okay. And also they did a forced choice test. And again, speech mismatching condition performed the worst. So it seems like for the learning Japanese vocabulary, mismatching gesture was not preferable. How about Spanish? You can see a picture of matching gesture on the left side. And can you guess what this word is? This was a keyboard. Okay. On the right side, it's a different word, so it's pretty hard to imagine, but actually this was used for happy. Does she look happy? Probably not. Okay. As they compared matching group and mismatching group and some others, and they also test vocabulary acquisition. Okay. And the results found that for immediate post test, matching gesture was better than mismatching conditions. So again, it was similar to Japanese study. Matching was better. But however, they also conducted 3 post tests. And you can see the purple one, which says incongruent. This is the same as mismatching gesture. And as you can see, there was no difference between matching and mismatching conditions for long-term post tests. So results are still inconclusive. Okay. But reading those studies, a question came to my mind, which was, the language teachers really use such a mismatching gesture in the real classroom? Okay. If we are doing this old experiment, if, although teachers don't use them, it's kind of meaningless, isn't it? So that is rationale for my study. So I first investigated what kind of mismatching gestures are used in experimental studies. For example, the person said chop while twisting twisting gesture, or saying twist while doing a chopping gesture. Would we really do that in real life? Or maybe also a pointing downwards, saying up and above. Is it really possible to do that? And also C-shaped hand and saying tall, short. It's also kind of ridiculous. Right? So the researchers actually confess that they rarely, if ever, see in spontaneous discourse or don't appear in the discourse normal adults. So they were really strange gestures. So here comes rationale for my study. So all of these studies are on mismatching gestures are experimental. Those gestures are carefully controlled to be mismatching with their accompanying speeches, most of which are contrived. We don't even know whether EFL teachers actually use those mismatching gestures spontaneously in the class. So I think that was a basic question to ask. So research questions. What kinds of mismatching diacritic gesture, pointing gesture do EFL teachers use in the classroom, and why do they occur? And this paper is under review somewhere. I don't know when it's coming, but it's in the future before I die. So please look for it. And I investigated the classroom practice of 2 different teachers. And then I don't have that much data, but overall, I found that they both use mismatching gestures sometimes, but not really frequently. But so mismatching gestures do occur. Okay? And in the paper, I chose 4 cases, and there's no time to talk about all of them. So I'm going to focus on number 3 because this is probably the most interesting one. Okay, so let me talk about this one. Here's a situation of the teaching class. The teacher reads aloud a story titled Bloody Mary to his adult students from his computer. In this story, the witch Bloody Mary was burned to death by villagers because she was killing and drinking blood of young girls to remain young. At the last moment, Mary cursed villagers and screamed that if anyone says her name 3 times in front of a mirror, she will come back and get revenge for her death. He explained that there are still people who believe that. And here's a transcript. Before I show the video, I think it's useful to take a look at the transcript first. So let me read this one. He says, yeah, and there's other variations too. There's other different kinds. So sometimes Bloody Mary is innocent, like she did not do anything to the town, and still they killed her. and so she wants vengeance. But in this story, she's actually bad. She was eating girls to make herself young, and so the villagers burned her. But either way, and here's the video begins. The story about today is if you look in the mirror and in a dark room, actually this story made, and he does a gesture pointing at his computer downward, makes that again, he points at downward at his computer, or people afraid of mirrors. They are, again, the same gesture, afraid of mirror. Okay, so here's the video, guys. Please take a look at it.
The story about today is if you look in the mirror and in a dark room. Actually, this story makes a lot of people afraid of mirrors. They're afraid of the mirror.
By the way, if you have any difficulty watching the video, the second link it should jump you to this video. So he used 3 gestures. Did you notice which gesture was mismatching? And also maybe why? Let me show you one more time.
The story about today is if you look in the mirror and in a dark room. Actually, this story makes a lot of people afraid of mirrors. They're afraid of the mirror.
Okay, so did you notice it? Okay, so let me explain which one it's mismatching and why. So he said, actually, this story made, and he points at his computer downward, and then he says makes a lot of people afraid of mirror because when he said made, it was a mistake because it should have been a present tense. He self-repaired the verb. Okay, and also he again pointed at the computer again, and this is called self-repeated gesture. Okay, so verbally, what does he refer to? He was referring to this story. Okay, so in this case, the verbal referent, this story, and gesture referent, point at a computer, was matching because the story was read from the computer. So it was perfectly matched. And then he goes to say they are afraid of mirror. And then he again pointed at this computer. The question is, who are they? If you read the sentences above, you can notice they refer to a lot of people. Then the question comes back to a lot of people. Who are they? Okay. So that is the question we need to ask. And there are 2 possibilities. One is people living now in general, okay, because he is using present tense. Okay, that makes sense. But if that's the case, pointing at the computer does not make sense because the people living now do not have nothing to do with the computer. So it's a mismatching. Okay. But the second possibility is that maybe he was referring to the villagers and he was using historic present. Okay. In order to check this one, we need to see his utterance when he mentioned the mirror. Here is what he said. As Bloody Mary burned, she screamed a curse at the villagers. If anyone says my name, Bloody Mary, in front of mirror, I will come back and get revenge for my death. The villagers went into the woods after burning the witch and found graves of the little girls the witch had killed. She had used their blood to make herself young again. Now, even to this day, anyone foolish enough to say Bloody Mary's name in front of the dark mirror will bring the witch back. It is said that she will tear their bodies to pieces and rip their souls from their bodies. The souls of these poor people will burn just like Bloody Mary burned in the past, and they'll be trapped in the mirror forever. It's pretty scary, isn't it? So the question is, then, were the villagers afraid of mirrors? If you read this paragraph, actually, it's a no. We're not sure, right? It doesn't say so. So if it's not, maybe they are not afraid of mirrors, then the point at the computer is a mismatching because they are not afraid of mirrors. But still, maybe we can surmise or hypothesize that the villagers were afraid of mirrors. It sounds like, but it's not explicit. Okay. So perhaps the teacher supposed that the villagers were also afraid of mirrors. Then it was mismatching only in the teacher's mind. Perhaps. Okay. So here's the conclusions. Okay. The first conclusion. Do language teachers use mismatching gestures? According to my data, yes, but not very often. The second, do these gestures really mismatching? And I would say it's mismatching for students, but perhaps it's matching for teachers. And third, do these gestures confuse learners? That is the most important, crucial question to ask. And then I would say probably no, although I didn't show you other 3 cases. Looking at the 4 cases that I found, it's really difficult to notice that they are mismatching unless you analyze each gesture really in detail. So I guess you didn't really notice that this was a mismatching, I believe. So it's pretty difficult to notice. Then it probably doesn't confuse learners so much. Still, this conclusion should be tentative because mismatching gesture in real classroom are hardly examined yet. And also because I focused only on pointing gesture, there are other types of gestures and the effects of mismatching may be influenced by types of gestures. So more research is called for. As a reference, thank you very much for your gesture attention.